The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in May 1878, changing everything Isaac Yardley thought he knew about loneliness. Standing in the dusty street of Panamint, California, with the desert wind whipping sand against his worn boots, he read the words 3 times before accepting they were real. Miss Zara Ashford arriving Thursday stop prepared for marriage stop. Isaac folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his shirt pocket, his calloused fingers trembling slightly. At 26 years old, he had spent the last 5 years building a cattle ranch on the outskirts of this silver mining town, working until his hands bled and his back screamed for mercy. He had neighbors who helped during branding season, acquaintances who nodded at him in the general store, but no real companionship. The isolation had carved itself deep into his bones until he barely remembered what it felt like to share a meal with another soul who cared whether he lived or died. 6 months ago, drunk on whiskey and loneliness after a particularly brutal winter, he had written to a matrimonial agency in San Francisco. The letter had been awkward and honest, describing his ranch, his prospects, his need for a partner in this hard land. He had almost forgotten about it until the first response came, a neat feminine hand describing a woman named Zara who wanted to escape the crowded city for a different kind of life. Now Thursday had arrived, and Isaac stood on the platform of the Panamint train station, his best shirt pressed and his hair slicked back with water. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as the train pulled in with a shriek of metal and a belch of black smoke. His heart hammered against his ribs as passengers began to disembark. Miners heading for the claims, businessmen in suits already wilting in the heat, a family with 3 squalling children. Then he saw her. Zara Ashford stepped down from the train car with a careful precision that suggested she was concentrating on every movement. She wore a dark blue traveling dress that had probably been fine once, but now showed the wear of a long journey. Her honey-colored hair was pinned up beneath a simple bonnet, and she carried a single worn carpet bag that seemed to contain all her worldly possessions. But it was her face that made Isaac's breath catch. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in a pale, delicate way that seemed utterly unsuited to this harsh landscape. It was her eyes that arrested him, wide and brown and absolutely terrified. "Miss Ashford." Isaac removed his hat and stepped forward, trying to keep his voice gentle. "I am Isaac Yardley." She looked at him directly then, and he saw her throat work as if she was trying to form words. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Instead, she simply nodded once, her knuckles white where she gripped the handle of her bag. Isaac waited, uncertain. "Did you have a good journey? It is a long way from San Francisco." Again that working of her throat, that look of concentration as if she was fighting against some invisible barrier. But again, only silence. Her eyes filled with something that looked like shame or fear or both, and she dropped her gaze to the dusty platform. "That is all right," Isaac said quickly, though confusion swirled through him. "You must be tired. Let me take your bag. My wagon is just over here." She released the carpet bag to him and followed as he led the way through town. People stared. Panamint was not large, maybe 800 souls at its peak, and everyone knew everyone's business. By sundown, the entire town would know that Isaac Yardley's mail-order bride had arrived, and there was something strange about her. The wagon ride to his ranch took 40 minutes, and Isaac filled the silence with a steady stream of talk, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the property. "It is not much yet, but the grazing is good and I have a strong herd building. The house is small but solid. I built it myself 3 years ago. There is a creek that runs through the east pasture, never goes dry even in high summer." Zara sat beside him on the wagon seat, her hands folded in her lap, looking at everything with those wide, watchful eyes. Sometimes she would nod, as if to show she was listening, but never once did she speak. When they reached the ranch house, a simple four-room structure of timber and adobe, Isaac helped her down from the wagon. Her hand in his was small and cold despite the heat. "I know this is not what you are used to," he said, "but it is clean and the roof does not leak. I made up the bedroom for you. I will sleep in the barn until we are properly married." She looked at him sharply then, and he saw surprise flicker across her face, followed by what might have been relief. Then she nodded again and allowed him to show her inside. The house was indeed clean. Isaac had spent the last 3 days scrubbing every surface, washing windows, beating rugs. The main room served as kitchen and sitting area, with a stone fireplace taking up most of one wall. 2 small bedrooms opened off to the side, and there was a storage room for supplies. Simple furniture, all of it handmade. Nothing fancy but honest work. Zara moved through the space slowly, running her fingers along the back of a chair, pausing at the window to look out at the rolling hills beyond. Isaac watched her, trying to understand. In her letters, she had been articulate, even eloquent. She had described her love of books, her work as a seamstress, her dreams of a quieter life away from the city. There had been no mention of this silence. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I have stew on the stove." "It is not fancy cooking, but it is filling." She turned to him, and this time she managed a small smile, though it looked like it cost her effort. She nodded. They ate dinner at the small table as the sun sank toward the horizon. Isaac kept up his one-sided conversation, feeling increasingly foolish but unable to bear the quiet. "Tomorrow I need to check the fence line in the south pasture. Some of the posts are loose. You are welcome to come along if you like, or you can rest here. I know you must be worn out from traveling." Zara ate carefully, small bites, her eyes on her plate. When she finished, she stood and gathered both their dishes, carrying them to the wash basin. Isaac rose to help, but she shook her head firmly, gesturing for him to sit. He watched as she washed and dried each dish with meticulous care, putting everything away in its proper place as if she had lived here for years. When darkness fell completely, Isaac lit the lamps and showed her to the larger bedroom. "I changed the sheets this morning," he said. "There is water in the pitcher if you need to wash up. If you need anything in the night, anything at all, I will be just outside in the barn. Do not hesitate to call." As soon as the words left his mouth, he realized how useless they were. She could not call. She had not spoken a single word since arriving. He felt his face heat with embarrassment. "I mean, if you need something, you can come get me. I am a light sleeper." Zara looked at him for a long moment, and he thought he saw gratitude in her expression. She reached out and touched his hand briefly, her fingers light as bird wings, then withdrew into the bedroom and closed the door softly. Isaac stood in the empty main room, listening to the night sounds through the open windows. Crickets sang in the grass. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. He should go to the barn, stretch out on the cot he had set up there. Instead, he found himself sitting in the rocking chair his mother had given him before she died, wondering what in God's name he had gotten himself into. The next morning, Isaac woke before dawn as always. He milked the cow, fed the chickens, and checked on the horses. When he came back to the house, smoke was rising from the chimney and he could smell coffee. He entered cautiously, still uncertain of how to navigate this strange new arrangement. Zara had found the supplies and made breakfast. Eggs, bacon, biscuits that looked far better than anything he had managed to produce. She had even picked wildflowers and put them in a jar on the table. She was dressed in a simple calico work dress, her hair braided and pinned up. She looked like she belonged here, like she had always been here, except for that persistent silence. "This looks wonderful," Isaac said, sitting down. "Thank you." She poured coffee for both of them and took her seat. As they ate, Isaac tried a different approach. "Miss Ashford, I do not want to pry into your privacy, but I need to understand. In your letters you wrote so well. I assumed we would be able to talk. Is there some reason you cannot speak? Are you unwell?" She set down her fork slowly and looked at him, really looked at him. He saw her chest rise and fall with a deep breath. Then she reached across the table and touched her throat, shaking her head. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You cannot," he said slowly, understanding dawning. "It is not that you will not, you cannot. Something is wrong with your voice." She nodded, relief flooding her features. Then she mimed writing, her fingers moving as if holding a pen. "You can write it down. You want paper." Another nod, more emphatic this time. Isaac jumped up and rummaged through his meager supplies until he found a stub of pencil and some old receipts with blank backs. He brought them to her and watched as she bent over the paper, writing quickly in that same neat hand he recognized from her letters. When she finished, she pushed the paper toward him. Isaac read, "I am so sorry. I should have told you before I came, but I was afraid you would refuse me. 3 months ago, there was a fire in the boarding house where I lived. I breathed in too much smoke trying to help others escape. The doctor says my voice may return someday, or it may not. He cannot say for certain. I understand if you cannot accept a wife who cannot speak. I have money saved for return passage. I will leave in the morning if you wish." Isaac read the message twice, then looked up at her. She was watching him with an expression of resigned sadness, as if she had been rejected so many times before that she was already preparing for it again. "You saved people from a fire," he said quietly. "You risked your own safety to help others, and you are apologizing to me." She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "Miss Ashford, I do not need a wife who can talk. I need a partner, someone who will help build this ranch and make a home here. If you are willing to try, then I am willing as well. But I will not force you into anything. If you want to leave, I will take you back to the station with no hard feelings. The choice is yours." For the first time since she had arrived, Zara smiled fully, and it transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. She picked up the pencil and wrote, "I would like to stay if you truly mean it." "I mean it," Isaac said. "Now I have fences to check. Do you want to come along and see the property, or would you rather stay here and get settled?" She pointed at herself and then at him, indicating she would come. They spent the morning riding the fence line. Isaac on his gelding and Zara on the gentle mare he kept for supply runs. She was not an experienced rider, he could tell, but she adapted quickly, watching how he moved with the horse and mimicking it. They did not speak, obviously, but the silence felt different now, companionable rather than awkward. When he showed her the creek, she dismounted and knelt beside it, trailing her fingers in the clear water and smiling at something she saw in the current. Over the following days, they developed a rhythm. Isaac would wake early and do the morning chores while Zara made breakfast. They would eat together, communicating through gestures and the occasional note when clarification was needed. Then they would work. She took over the garden, which had been neglected during the months Isaac had lived alone, and he was amazed to see how quickly it flourished under her care. She also improved the house in small ways. Curtains appeared at the windows, made from spare fabric she found in the storage room. The meals became more varied and flavorful. She mended his clothes, which had been falling apart from rough use and no maintenance. In the evenings, they would sit together, and Zara would write. Long passages describing her day, her thoughts, her observations. Isaac would read them aloud back to her, partly to make sure he understood and partly because he discovered he liked hearing her words, even if they were in his voice. She wrote about missing the sound of the ocean from San Francisco, about how the desert sunset painted the sky in colors she had never imagined, about the family of rabbits she had discovered living under the front porch. 2 weeks after her arrival, Isaac rode into town to pick up supplies and to speak with the circuit preacher about a wedding. Reverend Thomas was a traveling minister who came through Panamint once a month, and he was due back the following Sunday. "I heard you got yourself a bride," Reverend Thomas said, counting out nails into a sack. "Folks say she does not talk." "She cannot talk," Isaac corrected, his tone sharp. "There is a difference." "No offense meant, son. Just curious how you plan to conduct a marriage ceremony if the bride cannot speak her vows." Isaac had been thinking about this. "She can write them down. You can read them aloud and she can indicate her agreement. That should be legal enough, should it not?" Reverend Thomas scratched his beard. "Never done it that way before, but I suppose it would work. The important thing is that both parties agree to the union. If she can communicate that agreement, even without speech, then I see no problem." "Then we will see you Sunday," Isaac said. When he returned to the ranch, Zara was hanging laundry on the line he had strung up behind the house. The wind was whipping the sheets and her skirts, and loose strands of her hair had escaped her braid to dance around her face. She looked up when she heard the wagon and waved, and Isaac felt something shift in his chest. It was not the desperate loneliness that had driven him to write to the matrimonial agency. It was something warmer, more specific. He was starting to care about this silent woman, about her small smiles and her gentle presence, and the way she hummed sometimes without realizing it. She could not speak, but she could hum, and the sound had become the sweetest part of his day. He climbed down from the wagon and helped her carry supplies inside. When everything was put away, he handed her the pencil and paper. "I spoke with the preacher. He will marry us on Sunday if you still want to." She took the pencil and wrote quickly, "Do you still want to?" "Yes," Isaac said without hesitation. "These past 2 weeks have been the best I have had in years. You work hard, you have made this house a home, and I enjoy your company. That is more than most married couples start with. What do you think?" she wrote. "I think I am lucky to have found you, yes. Sunday is perfect." That evening, as they sat together after dinner, Isaac pulled out the guitar he had not touched in months. "My father taught me to play," he explained. "I am not very good, but I know a few songs." He played clumsily, his fingers stumbling over strings he had neglected for too long. But Zara leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest. When he finished the first song, she applauded silently, her hands making no sound but the gesture clear. Encouraged, he played another and another. On the fourth song he heard it, a humming sound, soft and tentative, following the melody. He looked up and saw that Zara had her eyes closed, swaying slightly, that unconscious hum rising from her throat. He kept playing, afraid that if he stopped or acknowledged it, she would become self-conscious and stop. But inside, his heart was singing along with her. She could make sound. Her voice was not entirely gone. It was damaged, yes, changed, but not dead. The hum was wordless and breathy, but it was music, and it was beautiful. When he finally set the guitar aside, Zara opened her eyes. She looked embarrassed, her hand moving to her throat as if she had not realized she was making noise. "That was lovely," Isaac said softly. "Please do not stop on my account. I like hearing you." She blinked rapidly, fighting tears, then reached for the paper. She wrote, "I did not know I could still do that. I have not tried to make any sound since the fire. I was afraid of what would come out." "It was beautiful," Isaac repeated. "If you want to practice to try other sounds, I will never judge what I hear. This is your home. You are safe here." Sunday arrived with clear skies and unseasonable coolness. Zara wore the best dress she owned, a gray silk that had been her mother's. Isaac put on the suit he had worn to his own mother's funeral, the only formal clothes he possessed. They rode into town together in the wagon, neither speaking, both lost in their own thoughts. The church in Panamint was a simple wooden structure that also served as a schoolhouse during the week. Reverend Thomas was waiting, along with a handful of townspeople who had come out of curiosity. Isaac recognized Ben Miller, who owned the neighboring ranch, and his wife Sarah. There was Mrs. Chen, who ran the general store, and old Pete Sullivan, who seemed to attend every event in town whether invited or not. "Shall we begin?" Reverend Thomas asked. Isaac and Zara stood before him, and the Reverend opened his worn Bible. "We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Now, Isaac Yardley, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Isaac said clearly. Reverend Thomas turned to Zara. "Miss Ashford has prepared her vows in writing, which I will read now." He unfolded the paper she had given him and read in his deep voice. "I, Zara Ashford, take you, Isaac Yardley, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to be your partner in all things, to work beside you in building our home and our life together, to honor and respect you in times of joy and times of struggle, until death parts us. I make this promise freely and with my whole heart." He looked at Zara. "Miss Ashford, do you affirm these vows?" Zara nodded solemnly, then did something unexpected. She opened her mouth and a sound came out. Not words exactly, but a clear vocalization, something between a hum and a vowel sound. Ah! It was unmistakably an affirmative, an emphatic yes. Several people in the small congregation gasped. Isaac felt his throat tighten with emotion. Reverend Thomas smiled. "Then, by the power vested in me by the state of California and by God Almighty, I pronounce you husband and wife. Isaac, you may kiss your bride." Isaac turned to Zara, suddenly nervous. They had barely touched beyond the occasional brush of hands, but she was looking up at him with tears streaming down her face and that small, genuine smile, and he cupped her face gently in his rough hands and kissed her. It was brief and chaste, but it was real, and when they pulled apart, he whispered, "Hello, Mrs. Yardley." She laughed. Actually laughed, a breathy, soundless exhalation that shook her shoulders, but unmistakably a laugh. The townspeople who had attended clapped politely, and Sarah Miller pressed a basket of food into Zara's hands. "For your wedding supper," she said warmly. "Welcome to Panamint, dear." As they rode back to the ranch, now as husband and wife, Isaac felt a contentment he had never experienced before. The afternoon sun was warm on his shoulders. Beside him, his wife sat straight and proud. When he glanced at her, she was smiling at the horizon, and she was humming again, that wordless melody that was becoming the soundtrack of his life. The first month of marriage passed in a blur of work and slow, careful growing together. Isaac moved his things from the barn into the bedroom, and they navigated the awkwardness of sharing space. Zara was modest and careful, always dressing and undressing behind a screen she had fashioned from an old blanket. Isaac gave her privacy and time, determined not to rush anything. They slept in the same bed, but with careful distance between them, like strangers sharing a coach seat. But gradually, the distance shrank. One cold night, Zara unconsciously curled closer to Isaac's warmth in her sleep. He woke to find her head on his shoulder, one hand resting on his chest. He lay very still, hardly breathing, treasuring the trust implicit in her relaxed form. When she woke and realized where she was, she started to pull away, but Isaac gently wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Stay," he said softly. "Please." I like this." She relaxed against him again, and he felt her nod against his shoulder. They began to touch more freely after that. His hand on the small of her back as they walked, her fingers squeezing his arm when something amused or surprised her. Small kisses in passing, morning and evening. Nothing passionate yet, but building toward something. Zara continued to practice making sounds. Every evening, Isaac would play the guitar and she would hum along, gaining confidence. She experimented with different noises, frustrated when they came out wrong or not at all, delighted when she managed something new. She could sometimes produce vowel sounds, though consonants remained elusive. Ah and oo and e sounds. Isaac encouraged every attempt, no matter how garbled. One evening about 6 weeks after the wedding, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Zara reached for the paper and pencil she now carried everywhere. She wrote, "Why did you really write to the matrimonial agency? A man like you could have found a wife here in town." Isaac considered the question. "I could have, maybe, but I am not good with words in person. I say the wrong thing or nothing at all. Writing a letter, I could take my time, say exactly what I meant. And honestly, I think I was afraid of courting someone local, having everyone watching and gossiping. It felt safer to reach out to someone far away, someone who did not know me or have expectations." She nodded and wrote more. "I understand that. I answered your letter because you sounded honest and kind, and because I needed to leave San Francisco. After the fire, people looked at me differently. Some pitied me. Some thought I was putting on airs, pretending to be mute for attention. A few thought I was cursed or being punished by God. I could not bear it any more. I am sorry that happened to you," Isaac said, "but I am grateful you came here, selfish as that may be." She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. He put his arm around her, and they sat like that until the night grew too cold and they went inside to bed. The true turning point came 2 months after the wedding. Isaac woke in the middle of the night to an empty bed and the sound of crying. Muffled, breathy crying, but unmistakable. He found Zara in the main room, wrapped in a blanket, sitting in the rocking chair with tears streaming down her face. "What is wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Are you hurt? Are you sick?" She shook her head and reached for her paper, but her hands were shaking too badly to write. Isaac took the pencil from her and set it aside, then simply gathered her into his arms. She collapsed against him, her body racked with silent sobs. He held her and rocked her, murmuring nonsense words of comfort until the storm passed. Finally, when she had calmed enough, she pulled back and managed to write. "Nightmares, about the fire, they come sometimes. I am sorry I woke you." "Do not apologize," Isaac said firmly. "That is what I am here for, to hold you when the nightmares come, to remind you that you are safe now. You saved people, Zara. You are a hero, but that does not mean it did not cost you. Of course you have nightmares." She stared at him for a long moment, then threw her arms around his neck and held on tight. He felt wetness on his shoulder where she pressed her face, but she was not sobbing anymore. When she finally pulled back, she pointed to the bedroom, then to him, clearly asking him to stay close. They returned to bed, and this time when she curled against him, there was desperation in it, a need for connection and comfort. Isaac held her close, one hand stroking her hair. "I have you," he whispered into the darkness. "I am right here. You are not alone." She tilted her face up to his, and in the faint moonlight through the window, he could see her eyes searching his face. Then she kissed him, really kissed him, with a passion and need that had been building for weeks. Isaac responded carefully, letting her set the pace, his hands gentle on her back. When she pulled him closer, he went. When she began to unlace her nightgown, he helped. They made love slowly, carefully, Isaac constantly watching her face for any sign of fear or doubt. But there was only trust and need and something deeper, something that might have been love beginning to bloom. Afterward, she clung to him, her face buried in his neck, and he felt her lips move against his skin, forming silent words he could not hear but understood anyway. In the morning, they woke tangled together, and for the first time since Zara had arrived, Isaac felt like they were truly married. Not just two lonely people sharing space, but partners, lovers, a team. She looked at him with soft eyes and traced his face with her fingertips, learning the landscape of him. He kissed her palm and she smiled. From that night on, the nightmare came less frequently, and when they did, Isaac was there to hold her through them. Their physical relationship grew and deepened, becoming a way for Zara to express feelings she could not speak aloud. In the privacy of their bedroom, she was bold and passionate, pouring all her unspoken words into touches and kisses. But Isaac still waited for her voice, not because he needed it, but because he knew she did. He saw the frustration in her eyes when she could not express a complex thought quickly, when writing took too long and the moment passed. He saw her watching other people talk, her lips sometimes moving along silently as if trying to remember how it felt. 3 months into their marriage, as autumn began to cool the desert heat, Isaac had to make a trip to the larger town of Bishop, about 40 miles north. A buyer there was interested in some of his cattle, and the price was good enough to justify the journey. He would be gone for 3 days, maybe 4. "I do not like leaving you alone," he told Zara the morning he was set to depart. "But Ben Miller said his wife Sarah would come check on you each day, and you know where the rifle is if you need it." Zara nodded and handed him a note she had written the night before. "I will be fine. Make a good deal and come home safe. I will miss you." Isaac kissed her goodbye, a long, thorough kiss that promised his return. "I will miss you too, more than you know." He rode out with the sun just cresting the horizon, leading a string of 10 cattle. The journey was uneventful, the business concluded successfully, and he started home on the 3rd day, eager to see his wife. But when he was still 5 miles from the ranch, he saw smoke. Too much smoke. Not from a chimney, but from something larger burning. His heart seized in his chest. He kicked his horse into a gallop, the cattle forgotten behind him. As he crested the final hill and saw his ranch laid out below, relief and fear warred in his chest. The house still stood, untouched. But the barn was ablaze, flames shooting high into the air. And there, in front of the house, he saw Zara struggling with 2 of the horses, trying to keep them calm and away from the fire. Isaac rode straight to her, leaping from his horse before it had fully stopped. "Are you hurt?" He shouted over the roar of the flames. "What happened?" Zara was covered in soot, her eyes wild. She pointed frantically at the burning barn, then held up 3 fingers. 3 horses. He had 3 horses, and she had only managed to save 2. "Oh God," Isaac breathed. His favorite mare, the one his father had given him, was still inside. He could hear her screaming, a sound that chilled his blood. "Stay here," he shouted at Zara, and before she could stop him, he ran toward the barn. The heat was incredible, like standing too close to the devil's own furnace. The main doors had collapsed, but there was a side entrance, smaller, not yet engulfed. Isaac wrapped his bandana around his face and ducked inside. The smoke was blinding, choking. He dropped to his knees where the air was slightly better and crawled toward the sound of the mare's panicked whinnying. He found her in the 3rd stall, rearing and kicking at the walls, insane with fear. Her stall door was jammed, swollen shut from the heat or perhaps warped by the flames. Isaac grabbed a shovel leaning against the wall and used it as a lever, prying at the door. Above him, a beam cracked ominously. The mare screamed. Isaac threw all his strength against the shovel, and the door finally gave way. The mare bolted past him, nearly trampling him in her panic. He turned to follow, but the beam chose that moment to give way entirely. It crashed down, catching Isaac across the shoulders and pinning him to the ground. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and all-consuming. He tried to push up, but the beam was too heavy. Smoke filled his lungs, each breath searing agony. Through the roar of the fire and the pounding of his own heartbeat. He heard something impossible. A voice, hoarse and rough and cracking on every syllable, but unmistakably a voice. Unmistakably Zara's voice. "Isaac, Isaac, where are you?" "Here." He tried to shout, but it came out as a wheeze. Then she was there, materializing out of the smoke like an angel, her skirts smoking at the hem. When she saw the beam pinning him, her eyes went wide with fear. "Too heavy," Isaac gasped. "Get out, save yourself." But Zara shook her head violently. She grabbed the beam and pulled with all her strength. It did not budge. She looked around frantically, spotted the shovel, and jammed it under the beam as a lever, exactly as Isaac had done to the stall door. She threw her weight against it, her face contorted with effort. "Please," came that impossible, broken voice. "Please move." Whether she was talking to the beam or to God, Isaac could not tell, but incredibly the beam shifted slightly, just enough. Isaac dragged himself forward, his legs screaming in protest. As soon as he was clear, Zara dropped the shovel and grabbed his arms, pulling him toward the door. Above them, more beams were cracking, the roof preparing to collapse. They tumbled out of the side door and into the blessed coolness of the open air, just as the barn's roof caved in with a roar like thunder. Zara dragged Isaac away from the inferno, not stopping until they were well clear. Then she collapsed beside him, both of them coughing and choking on smoke-filled lungs. Sarah Miller came running from where she had been riding in to check on Zara, having seen the smoke from the road. "Oh my Lord! Isaac, Zara, are you hurt?" "Get water," Zara croaked, her voice barely recognizable. "Burns." Sarah stared at her in shock, having never heard Zara speak before, but she recovered quickly and ran for the well. She brought bucket after bucket, dousing the sparks on their clothing, helping them drink small sips. By the time Ben Miller arrived with several other neighbors drawn by the smoke, the barn was nothing but smoldering ruins. But Isaac and Zara were alive, and miraculously, all 3 horses had survived. Doc Morrison, who had ridden out from town, examined them both. Isaac had bruising across his shoulders and back that would hurt for weeks, but no broken bones. Both of them had minor burns and smoke inhalation, but nothing life-threatening. "You were incredibly lucky," Doc Morrison said sternly. "Running into a burning building is about the stupidest thing a man can do." "I know," Isaac wheezed, "but I could not let her burn. And you," the doctor turned to Zara, "I heard you speaking. Your voice has returned." Zara touched her throat wonderingly, then looked at Isaac. "Isaac," she said, his name rough and broken but clear. "Are you all right?" "I am now," he said, reaching for her hand. "You saved my life, and you spoke. My God, Zara, you spoke." Tears streamed down her soot-stained face. "I thought I had lost you. I thought the fire had taken you like it took my voice. And I realized that I had been so afraid of my voice being broken that I never even tried. But when I thought you were dying, I had to try. I had to call for you." "It is beautiful," Isaac said, his own eyes wet. "You are beautiful. And your voice is perfect." She laughed, that breathy, soundless laugh, which then became a real laugh, hoarse and coughing but real. "It is terrible," she said. "It sounds like a rusty gate." "It is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard," Isaac insisted. The neighbors helped them salvage what they could from the barn's ruins and set up temporary shelter for the animals. Sarah insisted that Isaac and Zara both needed rest and care, and she and Ben would handle the basic chores for a few days. That night, lying in their bed, both still smelling of smoke despite washing, Isaac held Zara close. "What started the fire?" he asked. "Do you know?" "Lightning," she said slowly, clearly concentrating on forming each word. "Yesterday afternoon, it struck the barn. I did not see it start, but when I came back from the garden, it was burning. I got 2 horses out right away, but your mare was so scared and the door was stuck. I tried, but I could not open it alone. I am sorry." "Do not apologize," Isaac said fiercely. "You saved 2 horses and yourself. That is more than enough. I am the fool who ran back in." "For your father's horse," Zara said. "I know what she means to you." "She is just a horse," Isaac said. "Important, yes, but just a horse. You are my wife, you are everything. If I had to choose, there would be no choice." Zara was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I love you." The words were rough and slow, but they hit Isaac with the force of a physical blow. He cupped her face in his hands. "Say that again." "I love you," Isaac Yardley, clearer this time, more confident. "I love you too, Zara Yardley. I think I have since the day you arrived and looked at me with those scared eyes and stayed anyway." They kissed, deep and slow, tasting of smoke and survival. When they made love that night, it was different from before. More intense, more desperate, a celebration of being alive and together. And for the first time, Zara could tell him what she wanted, what she felt, even if the words came out broken and rough. In the aftermath, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Zara said, "I thought I lost everything in the first fire. My voice, my independence, my future. But it brought me here to you. And today, facing another fire, I got something back. Not my old voice, but a new one, and I still have you. Always," Isaac promised. "You will always have me." The next weeks were busy with rebuilding. Ben Miller and several other neighboring ranchers came to help Isaac construct a new barn. It would be smaller than the old one, at least until they could afford more lumber, but it would suffice. The community pulled together as communities in hard lands must, everyone understanding that today's disaster could be tomorrow's, and the help would flow both directions over time. Zara continued to practice speaking, and slowly, painfully, her voice grew stronger. It would never be what it had been, Doc Morrison explained when they rode into town for a follow-up examination. The smoke damage from the first fire had permanently affected her vocal cords, and while she had regained the ability to speak, it would always be raspy, always require effort. But Zara did not care. She could communicate, could express herself, could tell her husband she loved him in her own voice. That was enough. She also discovered that she could sing after a fashion. Her singing voice was breathy and rough, but it could carry a tune, and she sang while she worked in the garden, while she cooked, while she sewed. Isaac would stop whatever he was doing just to listen, treasured every cracked note. As winter approached, bringing cold winds and occasional snow to the high desert, Zara began to feel unwell. Nausea in the mornings, fatigue that had her napping in the afternoon. She suspected what it meant, but she waited until she was certain before riding into town to see Doc Morrison. He confirmed it with a smile. "Congratulations, Mrs. Yardley, you are going to be a mother. I would say the baby will come sometime in late spring, maybe early summer." Zara rode home in a daze of joy and terror. A baby. She was going to have a baby, Isaac's baby, their child. She could not wait to tell him. He was in the new barn, mucking out stalls when she arrived. She dismounted carefully and walked to him, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. "Isaac," she said, and he immediately heard something different in her tone. He set aside the pitchfork and came to her. "What is wrong? Are you all right?" "Nothing is wrong," she said, smiling. "Everything is right. Isaac, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her. Then a grin split his face, so wide and genuine that it made him look like a boy. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and protested. "A baby," he said. "We are going to have a baby." "When?" "Late spring, early summer." "Doc Morrison says I am healthy and everything looks good." Isaac set her down gently, as if she had suddenly become fragile. "You should rest. You should not be doing heavy work. I can hire someone to help with the house and garden." "I am pregnant, not dying," Zara said, amused. "I am fine. But maybe in a few months, some help would be good." Isaac insisted on treating her like spun glass anyway, taking over tasks he thought too strenuous, worrying over every twinge or moment of discomfort. Zara found it alternately endearing and frustrating, but she loved him for it. As winter deepened, they spent long evenings planning for the baby. Isaac began building a cradle from smooth pine, carving it with careful attention to detail. Zara sewed tiny clothes, creating a layette from soft fabric Sarah Miller helped her select. They argued good-naturedly about names, about whether they wanted a boy or a girl, about how they would handle raising a child in such a remote location. "We will teach them to be strong," Isaac said one night, his hand resting on Zara's growing belly. "To be kind. To help others even when it costs them." "Like their mother," Zara said softly. "Like both their parents," Isaac corrected. The pregnancy progressed normally, if uncomfortably. Zara's morning sickness faded, replaced by the awkwardness of a growing belly and the strange sensations of the baby moving inside her. The first time she felt the baby kick, she grabbed Isaac's hand and pressed it to her stomach. His face when he felt that flutter of movement was something she would treasure forever. Spring arrived, bringing wildflowers and warm breezes and a restlessness to Zara. She wanted the baby out, wanted to meet this person they had created, wanted to hold them in her arms. But babies come in their own time, and Doc Morrison said everything was progressing as it should. In early June, on a hot afternoon when Isaac was working on reinforcing the fence around the vegetable garden, Zara felt the first contraction. She straightened from where she had been kneading bread dough, her hand going to her lower back. Not particularly painful, just a tightening, but unmistakable. "Isaac," she called out the open door, "I think it is time." He dropped the hammer he was holding and ran. "Time, the baby is coming, now." "Babies do not come instantly," Zara said, amused despite the nervousness fluttering in her chest. "But yes, it has started. You need to ride for Doc Morrison." Isaac looked torn between not wanting to leave her and knowing the doctor needed to be there. "Sarah," he said suddenly. "I will get Sarah first. She is closer. She can stay with you while I get the doctor." He rode like the devil himself was chasing him, returning less than an hour later with Sarah Miller, who carried a bag of supplies for birthing. "You go get the doctor," she told Isaac firmly. "I will take care of Zara." The next hours blurred together. The contractions grew stronger, closer together. Sarah helped Zara walk, rubbed her back, encouraged her through each wave of pain. When Doc Morrison finally arrived, with Isaac white-faced and terrified behind him, Zara was well into labor. "You are doing fine," Doc Morrison said after examining her. "Strong and healthy. This baby wants to meet the world. It should not be too much longer." But longer turned out to be relative. The sun was setting when the baby finally decided to arrive in earnest. Isaac held Zara's hand, letting her squeeze until his bones ached, murmuring encouragement when she could no longer speak, could only push and cry out. Finally, as the last light faded from the sky and the lamps cast dancing shadows on the walls, a thin, angry wail filled the room. "A boy," Doc Morrison announced, holding up the squalling infant. "You have a son." Zara collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and overwhelmed. Sarah quickly cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Zara's arms. The baby immediately quieted, his eyes trying to focus on his mother's face. "He is perfect," Zara breathed, her rough voice thick with emotion. "Isaac, look at him. He is perfect." Isaac stared down at his son with wonder. "He is so small." "All babies are small," Doc Morrison said with amusement, washing his hands. "But he is healthy, good color, strong lungs. You did well, Mrs. Yardley." After the doctor and Sarah left, promising to return the next day to check on them, Isaac and Zara were alone with their son. They had decided on a name weeks ago, but it felt more real now, looking at the tiny person who owned it. "Nathaniel," Isaac said softly. "Nathaniel Andrew Yardley." "Hello, Nate." The baby made a small sound, something between a sigh and a coo, and both parents laughed. "I think he approves," Zara said. That first night neither of them slept much. The baby nursed, cried, slept for short bursts, and woke to repeat the cycle. Isaac changed his first diaper, a fumbling, awkward process that had Zara laughing despite her exhaustion. They took turns holding Nathaniel, marveling over his tiny fingers and toes, his shock of dark hair, the way he gripped their fingers with surprising strength. "I never knew I could feel like this," Isaac whispered as dawn began to lighten the sky. "Like my heart is too full for my chest." "I know," Zara said, watching her son sleep against Isaac's shoulder. "Everything changed the day I got off that train. I was so scared. I thought you would send me away when you realized I could not speak. But you gave me a home and a life and love. You gave me everything." "You saved me first," Isaac said. "I was just existing before you came, working myself to exhaustion so I would not have to feel how lonely I was. You made me want to live again." The weeks after Nathaniel's birth were chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Zara's body slowly recovered. The baby began to sleep for longer stretches, allowing his parents to reclaim some rest. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, taking over nighttime diaper changes without complaint, walking the floor with a fussy infant so Zara could sleep, making faces to provoke smiles once Nathaniel was old enough to smile back. The ranch prospered. Isaac's reputation for quality cattle spread, and he was able to expand his herd. They hired a young man from town, Martin Stevens, to help with the heavier labor, which gave Isaac more time with his family. Zara's garden flourished, and she began selling excess produce in town, bringing in extra income. Nathaniel grew from a helpless infant into a curious, active toddler. He took his first steps on a warm autumn afternoon, lurching from his mother to his father with a delighted shriek. He spoke his first word at 14 months, appropriately enough. It was mama, though it came out more like ma. Zara cried when she heard it, remembering when she could not say anything at all. On their second wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Zara with a gift. He had ordered it from San Francisco months earlier, paying an exorbitant sum to have it shipped across the state. It was a piano, small and slightly battered but with good bones and a decent sound. "I know you like music," he said as she stared at it in shock. "I thought maybe you could teach Nathaniel to play when he is older, and I like hearing you sing, even if you say your voice is broken. Maybe you can play and sing together." Zara threw her arms around him. "Thank you. I love it. I love you." That evening, after Nathaniel was in bed, she sat at the piano and picked out a simple melody, her fingers remembering lessons from childhood. Isaac sat nearby with his guitar, and they made music together, rough and unpracticed but joyful. When Nathaniel was 3 years old, Zara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder. She was sick longer, tired more easily. Doc Morrison said everything was progressing normally, but she was not as young as she had been the first time, and her body felt every moment of it. In early spring, she gave birth to a daughter after a long and difficult labor. They named her Rose because she was as beautiful and delicate as a desert wildflower. She had her mother's honey-colored hair and her father's serious gray eyes. With 2 children under 5, the ranch house felt smaller and more chaotic. But it also felt more alive, more like a real home. Nathaniel adored his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her. Isaac expanded the house, adding 2 more rooms so the children could eventually have their own spaces. The years passed with the kind of speed that only comes when you are busy and happy. Nathaniel started school in town, riding in each morning with his father and returning in the afternoon. Rose proved to be quieter than her brother, but with a core of steel that reminded everyone of her mother. She learned to ride almost before she could walk, and she had no fear of anything. When Nathaniel was 8 and Rose was 5, Zara stood in the doorway of their home, watching Isaac teach both children to rope a fence post. It was a sunny afternoon, and the sound of the children's laughter carried on the breeze. She thought about the frightened, silent woman who had stepped off the train 5 years ago, about the lonely cowboy who had waited patiently for her to find her voice. Isaac glanced up and caught her watching. He smiled and gestured for her to join them. She walked out into the yard and he pulled her close, kissing her temple. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am," she said, her voice still rough but strong. "How one telegram and a train ticket changed everything." "I am the lucky one," Isaac said. "I waited 3 months for your first word, but I would have waited 3 years, 30 years, forever. You were worth waiting for." "You did not have to wait as long as you thought," Zara said. "I was speaking to you from the beginning. You just had to learn my language first." "Mama, Daddy, watch this," Nathaniel shouted, swinging his rope with more enthusiasm than accuracy. "I see you," Zara called back, laughing as the rope tangled around his own feet. That evening, after the children were in bed, Isaac and Zara sat on the porch as they had countless times before. The stars were brilliant in the clear desert sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and another answered. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked. "Leaving San Francisco, coming here, marrying a stranger?" "Never," Zara said firmly. "This is where I was meant to be. You are who I was meant to find. Everything that came before, the good and the bad, the fire and the silence, it all led me here. How could I regret that?" "I was so nervous when I sent that first letter," Isaac admitted. "I thought no one would answer, or that they would and then change their mind when they met me. I thought I was destined to be alone." "You were never alone," Zara said. "I was already on my way to you. We just had not met yet." Isaac pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her against his side. "I love you, Zara Yardley." "I love you too, Isaac Yardley." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Inside, their children slept safely. Around them, the ranch they had built together stretched out into the darkness. It had not been an easy life, but it had been a good one. A life built on patience and trust, and a love that had grown from tentative beginnings into something strong and unshakable. Years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their story. Nathaniel grew into a tall, serious young man who had inherited his father's work ethic and his mother's determination. He took over more and more of the ranch operations, as Isaac's back began to protest the hard labor of earlier years. Rose became a skilled horsewoman and surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for business, taking over the financial management of the ranch with a sharp eye for profit and loss. When Nathaniel was 21, he married a schoolteacher from town, a kind young woman named Emma who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the far side of the ranch property, and within 2 years, Zara and Isaac became grandparents to twin boys. Rose showed no interest in settling down, declaring that she was far too busy managing the ranch's expansion to worry about courting. On a late autumn evening, when Isaac was 53 and Zara was 49, they sat on that same porch where they had spent so many evenings. The house behind them was quiet. The grandchildren had been collected by their parents, and Rose was in town attending a cattlemen's association meeting. "You remember the day we met?" Zara asked, her voice still carrying that distinctive rasp that Isaac had grown to love more with each passing year. "Every detail," Isaac said. "You were so pale, clutching that old carpetbag like it was a life preserver. You looked terrified." "I was terrified. I thought you would take one look at me, realize I could not speak, and send me right back on that train." "I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen," Isaac said. "And the bravest. You came all this way knowing you could not explain yourself, trusting that I would understand." "That took more courage than I had." "You waited," Zara said softly. 3 months you waited for me to speak. You never pushed, never demanded. You just waited and gave me time to find my voice again." "It was not even 3 months," Isaac said. 68 days from when you arrived until the fire, until you called my name. I counted every one of them, hoping each day would be the one I heard your voice. And when you did hear it, it was hoarse and broken." "It was perfect," Isaac corrected. "It was you, fighting through fear and damage to save someone you loved. How could it be anything but perfect?" Zara leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have had a good life, haven't we?" "The best," Isaac agreed. "Better than anything I imagined in those lonely years before you came." "I want you to know something," Zara said. "Even if I had never regained my voice, even if I had stayed silent forever, I would have been happy. You made me happy. You saw past the silence to who I was underneath. That was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me." Isaac felt his eyes burn with tears. "You gave me everything too. A home, a family, a purpose. Before you, I was just going through the motions. You made me want to live, not just survive." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and red. The same sky they had watched together for over 20 years, the same view that never grew old. "You think the children know how lucky they are?" Zara asked. "To have grown up here in a home full of love with parents who chose each other and fought for each other." "I think they know," Isaac said. "Maybe not fully yet, but they will. When they have their own children, when they face their own challenges, they will look back and understand what we built here." As the stars began to emerge one by one, Isaac thought about all the paths that had led them to this moment. His lonely letter to a matrimonial agency, written in desperation and hope. Zara's brave decision to answer, despite knowing she carried a secret that might doom the marriage before it began. The fire that had stolen her voice and the second fire that had returned it. The patient days of learning to communicate without words, and the joyful day when words became possible again. Every moment, every choice, every challenge had woven together to create this life. A life neither of them could have predicted or planned, but one that fit them both perfectly. Like two pieces of a puzzle that seemed wrong when you first looked at them, but turned out to be exactly right when you finally put them together. "Thank you," Zara said suddenly. "For seeing me when I could not speak for myself, for loving me even when I came broken, for waiting." "Thank you," Isaac replied, "for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy with nothing to offer but an isolated ranch and an honest heart, for staying when you could have left, for speaking when it must have been so hard to save my life, for building this life with me." Inside the house, the clock struck 9. It was later than they usually stayed up these days, but neither of them moved. They sat together, hands intertwined, watching the stars multiply across the vast desert sky. Tomorrow would bring its own tasks and challenges, but tonight they had this moment. This quiet acknowledgement of everything they had been through together, everything they had built, everything they had become. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dust and the promise of winter. Zara shivered slightly, and Isaac pulled her closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. She fit against his side as perfectly as she had that first night they slept together as husband and wife, when she had curled close seeking comfort from nightmares. "We should go inside," Isaac said. "It is getting cold." "A few more minutes," Zara said. "I want to remember this." "Remember what?" "This feeling. This perfect contentment. I want to hold on to it, keep it safe in my memory for the days when things are harder." "We will have many more nights like this," Isaac promised. "Many more years. I know. But I still want to remember." So they stayed, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a love out of patience and trust and mutual respect. The mail-order bride who could not speak, and the lonely cowboy who had waited for her voice. Neither of them perfect, both of them scarred by life and circumstance, but perfect for each other. Finally, when the cold became too much to ignore, they rose stiffly from the porch swing and went inside. Isaac banked the fire while Zara locked the doors and blew out the lamps. They prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of decades, moving around each other in the small bedroom like dancers who knew every step by heart. In bed, with the quilts pulled up against the autumn chill, they lay facing each other in the darkness. Isaac could just barely make out Zara's features in the faint moonlight through the window. "I love you," he said, as he had said countless times before and would say countless times again. "I love you too," she replied, her rough voice soft in the darkness. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after. Forever." They fell asleep like that, facing each other, hands linked between them. Outside, the ranch settled into nighttime rhythms. The horses shifted in the barn. An owl called from the cottonwood tree by the creek. The stars wheeled slowly overhead, witnessing the sleep of two people who had found in each other everything they never knew they needed. The years ahead would bring their own joys and sorrows, as years always do. There would be more grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. There would be droughts and good rains, profitable years and lean ones. There would be the slow, bittersweet process of aging, of bodies wearing out while spirits remained strong. But through it all, they would have each other. The foundation they had built in those first months and years proved unshakable, strong enough to weather any storm. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, their children and grandchildren would find them on the porch, sitting together in the swing Isaac had built 30 years earlier, watching the sunset and talking in low voices. The younger generations did not always understand what they were saying. Zara's voice had grown softer and rougher with age, harder to understand for those who had not spent decades learning its particular cadences. But Isaac always understood. He had spent years learning to hear what she said, in words and without them, and he never lost that gift. "Tell us how you met," the grandchildren would sometimes ask, gathering at their feet. Isaac would look at Zara, and she would nod, smiling. And he would tell the story. About a telegram and a train ticket, about a frightened woman who could not speak and a lonely cowboy who learned to wait. About patience and trust, about fires that destroyed and fires that revealed, about finding love in unexpected places, in unexpected ways. "The important thing," he would always finish, "is that we both took a chance. We both chose to try, even when it was hard and uncertain. That is what love is. Not the easy feelings at the beginning, though those are nice, but the choice to keep trying, to keep showing up, to keep building together even when things are difficult. And to wait, Zara would add, her voice barely audible but her eyes bright. Sometimes love means waiting for someone to be ready, to heal, to find their voice. Your grandfather waited for me. He gave me time and space and safety, and that gift was worth more than anything. The children would nod, understanding or not understanding, but carrying the story forward into their own lives. And the story would continue, passed down through generations. The tale of the mail-order bride who refused to speak, and the lonely cowboy who waited 3 months for her first word, and the life they built together in the hard, beautiful desert of California. This was their legacy. Not just the ranch, though that would endure for generations. Not just the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, though they were precious beyond measure. But the proof that love could grow in the hardest soil, that patience could overcome any obstacle, that 2 broken people could make each other whole. As the sun set on another day, Isaac and Zara Yardley sat together, hands linked, watching the sky burn gold and orange and red. They had watched thousands of sunsets together, and they hoped to watch thousands more. But if this was their last, it would be enough. Because they had lived fully, loved completely, and built something that would outlast them both. The story that had begun with silence had become a symphony. And though Zara's voice would never be what it once was, though it would always carry the marks of fire and damage, it had spoken the words that mattered most. I love you. I choose you. I am here. And Isaac's patient waiting, his gentle acceptance, his unwavering support had created the space for those words to be possible. Together, they had written a love story that proved the best things are worth waiting for, that true love sees past imperfections to the beautiful soul beneath. That home is not a place, but a person who makes you want to be brave. As night fell completely and the stars emerged one by one, they rose and went inside to the home they had made, to the bed they had shared for decades, to the life they had chosen. And they were content. Completely, perfectly content. The mail-order bride had found her voice, and the lonely cowboy had found his home. And together, they had found forever.